Hello, my name is Tyron Wayne, and I am a photographer, videographer, filmmaker, and journalist. Join me as I take you on the journey of my trip with an amazing group of people dedicated to healing, learning, exploring, cultural exchange, and celebration. This is A Journey to Cuba, the cultural exchange.
The other day, when I finished my presentation, one of the women get close to me and said, "My father's name is Maceo, and she didn't know why it was important, that name. Who was that guy? Maceo, I was reading in this book, visit New Orleans, Tampa, Key West, New York. And we are talking about 1876, 78,
Wow.
1884, collecting money for the process of the independence of Cuba.
Okay.
Because at that time, 1884, the slavery system was still alive in Cuba. And they said, no, Cuba cannot continue with the slavery system. We need to support the people. So for that reason, the people like Maceo and many others, blacks and even white, it was so important, and they went to the United States to collect money for the independence of Cuba and the abolition of the slavery system. And he was so important for African American community, because when he arrived in 1978, he has 22 marks in his body, struggling during 10 years here in Cuba. The first process of the independence of Cuba happened 1868 until 1878. And Maceo was one of the black general, and he get 22 marks of the weapons and hairs from the Spanish. So he was like a mythic, like a legend. When he arrived to the United States, the black community and everybody loved him and respect him and say, okay, we need to do something for Cuba independence and the abolition of the slavery system. So it was brothers and sisters plus many Cubans that were part of migration group, because they couldn't stay here because Spain wants to kill all these Cubans, being black or white, that talk about Cuban freedom of Cuba. They decided to go to the United States. So the black people, together with the immigrants from the different groups in Cuba, they get together for the independence. So it's our history, our Cuban history, that part is in the United States.
Yes.
Was written.
Yes.
Is connected with the United States. And then in 1898, when the United States declared the war against Spain to liberate Cuba, they called the immune people. Who were the immune people? The blacks. They said, let's go to send some blacks that they are immune to the weather and the weather of the Caribbean, because they used to work in the plantation system. You see how they trade the people from the United States, and they call them to come to Cuba, to liberate Cuba. So they knew, some black people, they knew about the history of Cuba, and they decided to come, but it was a big battle. Do we have black officers between us? We don't want to fight with white officers, yes or no? So it was a controversial, and when you check internet, you will see that it was a polemic about this. So it was not just that they come here and that's it.
Right.
They were part of the U.S. Army, but they have their own problems in the United States. Jim Crow law.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Because
easy.
at that time that they came to Cuba, 1898, it was the Jim Crow alive. And
Yes.
for that reason, some of them,
Yes.
they want to remain in Cuba.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
This
Yes.
is something that is incredible. But what happened with those who decided to remain in Cuba, or those to return and have these beautiful memories about Cuba? This is the kind of thing that we need to find.
Okay. Yes.
They fall in love with Cuba, with the history of Cuba.
Yes. Didn't the Buffalo Soldiers also go to the Philippines?
Yes. And Philippines and Puerto Rico. And we almost became in the same status like Puerto Rico. Almost.
Almost.
So
yeah.
you would have been U.S. territory, just
Yes.
like.
Yes.
For that
The
reason-
Virgin Islands.
See, for that, they still want us.
So why didn't it happen?
What happened that, and it's very interesting. In United States, they continue calling this war a Spanish-American War. Maceo and many others, they were fighting since 1868, 78. During 30 years, they have been fighting. But United States, they get it. So at the end, it was declared the peace. It was declared the peace, and the Spanish people, well, they finished. Cuba no more as part of Spain, but they put some rules to the new Cuban government.
The United States.
Yes,
Okay.
the Platt Amendment. Platt Amendment is something that appeared in our history that limited the rights of Cuba. And when we finished with the Spanish flag, who was the flag that we saw in the Morro? Have you seen the Morro? American flag. America. So it was not only until 1902 that we saw for the first time the Cuban flag.
Wow.
So
Wow.
it's to talk about the past, but to talk about the present, because we are still in that process. They always want us. Look at the position that Cuba has in the middle between Florida, Cuba, the Caribbean and Latin American countries. We are in the middle,
Right in the middle.
for the control, for the expansion, for the investment.
Exports.
I want to tell you the truth, because it's not just to talk about the past and the sea or the Buffalo Soldier and the poems. It's to try to understand, for the young generation especially, the emergency to talk about this kind of history.
I wanted to come here to Cuba because I'm from the U.S. Virgin Islands, and when I'm growing up, my parents taught me a lot about African ancestry, and that's kind of how they raise us, including to embody my name, Empress. And it means upright anointed one with knowledge. So coming here is like expanding my knowledge and bringing me back to home. It feels like I'm really digging into the ancestry of what happened in Africa and how it connects to Cubans, and especially because of the embargo and how everything happened with America, it seems like it's so unique being here and being able to experience the way that they live, the way that they handle things, even the way that they eat is so healthy, and how they reconstruct things to make it look practically amazing. I love that, and I love being able to hear them speak their language, which is Spanish, and being able to communicate and seeing the different personalities as well has been like mind-blowing, because they're so kind and open-hearted. Everybody's welcoming you with open arms, and I just love that because that's how my parents raised me. So it's just connecting back to my heart, connecting back to my roots, and I'm a Rastafarian, so it's easy for me to understand what they're saying when they talk about the spirituality and the Orishas and how it connects to Yamanya, the love, earth, the roots, because that's what Rastafarian is about too. They actually connect to roots and where we came from originally. So just being here is like a whole other experience for me. I absolutely love it. I have feel no way like experiencing the way that they live, because I know we had to start somewhere, and they are doing great. They're doing great things. Like even in teaching us their knowledge and seeing us experience is a whole new experience. I also like the fact that they do a lot of dancing and drumming, because it shows you how in America we listen to a lot of things on the radio and over electronics. Here everything is natural, so they use their own drums. They make their drums from cows and wood, and it's interesting to see that that's their main music. People pass on the street, children pass on the street, and they're not like, oh, I'm seeing someone drumming like that's something new. It's natural for them. This is an everyday thing. And then seeing them dance and express themselves and communicate, because they don't call it dancing, they call it a language. So it's a whole new experience. I think cultural exchange is important because being able to see other people's cultures and the way that they live help to expand your knowledge, and also help you to be able to give back and be connected, rather than feeling somewhat selfish or not wanting to experience things or go out. When you're experiencing other people's culture, you're able to expand your knowledge, you're able to teach the children, the younger people, what happened in the past and what's happening now, and how we could reconnect it and make it an even bigger and better thing, including in the government, the way that people live, they eat, the way that they act and speak to each other, communication. All of that is a whole new experience, because here you could see that people are kind-hearted, they're open-hearted, they're willing to share and give you their last. Whereas in America, you can tell that people are kind of selfish. They close up their doors, nobody's welcoming anybody anymore, and it's just like a need-to-know basis. Here, they're willing to share everything, and being able to see that makes me want to give and share more. So that's why I think cultural exchange is important. My name is Empress Adalia, and I love Cuba.
So as you can see, these are some of the first views that I saw when touching down at the airport in Cuba and getting into our taxi. We're riding through what is called Old Havana right now, and you can see that some of the cars are older. It's like taking a step back in time. Now you can see some of the beautiful buildings in Cuba, and although they are beautiful, the architecture is beautiful. You can tell the buildings are run down a little, and that is due to there not being a lot of money for construction or infrastructure in Cuba. This is our host Miguelito, who made sure our trip was amazing, along with his family and the Rumba All-Stars. Listen to him as he talks in the background about something important to note in Cuba.
Arawanda, those of you who were at the rooftop party the other night, he was the guy who showed up in the green shirt dancing. That's Luisito. So he's the director of this community project. He basically had the idea because it was kind of just a rundown house, patio, and he had the idea of turning it into a museum in homage of Tata Wines, one of the greatest rumberos of Cuba. In the States, any drop of black blood, you are black. Here, any drop of white blood, you are not black.
Esta playa es una de las zonas donde primeramente se hizo el San Cristóbal de La Habana.
This is where San Cristóbal, Saint Christopher.
Ajá. Eso que sí. Eso que ustedes ven allá en La Habana Vieja.
That what you see in old Havana.
En la plaza de Armas.
In the Plaza de Armas, it's called.
San Cristóbal de La Habana, donde primero estuvo fue aquí.
San Cristóbal of La Habana, he was first here.
Esa iglesia que vino por los españoles en el tiempo de la abolición de la esclavitud.
That church that was brought by the Spanish in the times of slavery.
Estuvo en esta playa aquí.
It was in this beach.
Pero como esto es una zona cenagosa, como ustedes la ven, pantanosa, que no está fuerte, pues no decidieron darle el bojeo a Cuba y llegar a la bahía.
But because this wasn't strong enough land, earth, to build a city, they went around and made it to an event. And so we're gonna do songs. We're gonna do spiritual songs that derive from the Congo traditions to the river, to the ocean, and to our ancestors.
My experience with Cuba has been great. I brought God with me, and I have been finding God through the many people who are here, my cousins. We essentially just got dropped off at different locations with the transatlantic slave trade. The music, especially the drums, it's like hearing a heartbeat from your ancestors, straight from the motherland. I'm so interested in learning about the African diaspora around the world, and I see a connectivity in all of it. I see very little separation, and it kind of angers me. I mean, we've definitely been lied to. They have attempted to erase it. They've attempted to bury it. There's been a concerted effort for centuries to steal our history, but it cannot be stolen. They've tried to bury it, but just like with any seed, if you bury it, give it a little manure, some rainy times, and a little bit of sunlight, it will grow immensely. And that's what I feel that I'm experiencing here. I'm getting to learn more about my family, my original culture and cultures. Most interesting point is when we went to the fort today, to recognize that this was almost a staging area. It was similar to the auction blocks in New Orleans or in Tennessee or in other parts of the U.S. There were so many different people from so many African nations that were brought here and then sold. And who knows, I don't know how my family ended up in Georgia. I don't know where it started, whether it was Virginia or Cuba or the like. But to know that we all come from the same tree, we all come from the same motherland, and to hear the drums that still is a common language no matter what language we speak today. Cuba, your plight is unique, but there is the continuous string of nations with people from African descent being marginalized, being held back, having their resources, talent, skills, and art stolen because we are an amazing people. And as Maya Angelou would say, but still we rise. And I say to Cuba, keep rising. I say to all of the diaspora all across the world, keep rising. Let's use the drum beats, let's use the heartbeat of our ancestors to communicate all around the world, to come together, to provide for our families.
¿Y qué sucede?
What happens?
Que eran esclavos que trabajaban en hacienda.
There were slaves that worked in haciendas.
Dan Manuel Fernández Gavilán
Dan Manuel Fernández Gavilán
y Tabascual Fernández.
and Tabascual.
Esos dos esclavos que ya eran libres
Those two slaves that were already free,
convencieron a un cura franciscano
they convinced a French cura, like a shaman,
denominación franciscana. Y,
from French denomination,
y con los dineros que en toda su esclavitud
with all the money that they were able to raise between their slave brothers and sisters,
habían podido guardar porque eran caleceros,
they were able to save money
porque eran esclavos que trabajaban dentro de la construcción de las viviendas de sus señores.
because they were enslaved. They were able to work inside these haciendas and make a little bit of money. They went safely.
So I'm going to summarize everything that he was telling us about the history of this temple and how it relates to Santeria. He was saying when Cubans were first enslaved on sugar plantations, similar to the colonizers of America, they were told that they cannot practice their religion or their spiritual practices. So what they did was save up all of their money that they could to build their own temple where they could congregate and practice their own spirituality and religion. He also stated that on the altar that you see behind him are images of Santa Barbara. They are white because this is how they would hide their Santeria, their spiritual practices or religion, in Christianity or Catholicism. And behind those white faces, they charged black orishas to make sure that they could always pray and worship their actual religion while they hid it from colonizers or the people who enslaved them.
First thing that got my attention to come to Cuba was to learn of the Santeria, which is their spiritual practices and customs, which I knew had something to do with our African roots. And I've been studying myself recently about the origins of the original prophecies and stuff. And since I embraced femininity and our sisterhood so much, I learned so much about women's role within even the prophecies. And I've learned over time that what is called sibyls were some of the original people that received prophecies from the Creator, and they were responsible for creating the first prophecy before there was a Quran, before there was a Torah, before there was the Bible. The sibyls were the ones who, were divine authority on earth. So when I heard of the Santeria and I came and I learned so much of the Orishas and how they still honor the mother of creation, that was a blessing for me because it connected to what I have been learning. And unfortunately, misogyny came in, the machismo energy came in, and women were just, ostracized, especially the priestesses, because before Christ was, healing the sick, giving sight to the blind, and these are things that these women naturally used to do. And they started to call them witches, and they overthrew them. Like I say, they burnt a lot of their literature together, as we learned in Cuba.
Un, dos, efecto, y co, co, do, co, co, do, co, co, y co, co, piti, piti, co, co, piti, piti, co, co. Co, piti, co, piti, co, piti, co. El último tapado.
It's difficult.
No hay muchas cosas favoritas. No. ¿Cómo podemos mejorar?
¿Cómo puede Cuba mejorar?
I don't know.
He doesn't
That's a
know.
political
Question.
No, for me, I don't know. Mejorar con ayuda,
Help.
con supermarket,
More supermarkets.
importar. La gente go to the United States. I come from Cuba. Business. For the business. Cuba mejora con business.
Yes.
All business, all people, con todo el
Business
mundo.
for all the people, for everyone in the world.
Business, here, people, communication for people. United States, Canadian, communication con business, everything.
Yeah.
Cuba.
So basically more of like a, just how we have our like daily businesses.
Se abre.
Yeah.
Se abre la pobreza, que lo que vivimos en la pobreza. Somos pobres.
Marketplace,
It's pobre. The
It's
city.
poor here.
It's the here people. It's the poor blacks people. It's poor in the city.
Black people are poor.
It's the house. It's not possible money for the reparation for the house.
The houses are in shambles.
Yeah, it's all. The city is all for religion. It's not good place. The house is very old house. It's no money for reparation. Go to the work. Work is nothing.
Yes.
Nothing the money. Every day is working is nothing. It's one chick. For example, go to the supermarket for the chicken. It's very expensive. For the fish, it's very expensive.
Yes.
For the fish, work is expensive. Nothing in Cuba is nothing the money. Every people go to another country. Young people go to another country. In Cuba is nothing. Pero si no, it's here. Go to the supermarket, nothing. Go to in the shop for the clothes, expensive, nothing. Every people young go another country.
The young people are going to other countries.
It's the here, man. Aquí here is the people blacks. It's nothing the money. It's pobre. It's the house. It's very old house. It's the here. It's nothing. It's the for the bread. For the cheap. The here. Cuando water every day, every day in the ring. It's the here. It's the water here. It's the water. The here, the beach is the here. It's the water. Every day, every time. It's no. It's
The people mean nothing to
It's people. The government is only looking. It's no problem. It's the black people. It's no problem. Nothing to go to the here. It's the people to go to the Baradero, go to the center city. It's like looking, but it's the here. Nothing. It's the people blacks. It's no problem.
I'd like to present to you my friend and our elder, Gloria Ronaldo.
Buenos días.
Buenos días.
The microphone. I hope that you can understand. My name is Gloria Victoria Rolando Casamayor. I was born here in Havana in 1953, 71 years old, but I am still here. I studied music, and at the University of Havana, I finished in 1976 art history. Since then, I have been working in the Film Institute, ICAI, here in Havana. But people of my generation, we didn't have film school. So I learned cinema working with different film directors. Basically in documentaries. And I love documentaries. And I continue with that kind of career. But the topics of my films are related with Afro-Cuban religion, Afro-Cuban history, why we have so many black people here in Cuba with English names. They came from Jamaica, Barbados, Trinidad, because after the Panama Canal, when the Panama Canal finished, many people came here to work in the sugar industry. So everything was around the sugar industry. For that reason, we have people from Jamaica, Barbados, but also we have people from Haiti. So my films are talking about the sugar industry and the connection with the people of the Caribbean. We are a Caribbean country, and the sugar and coffee plantation always was very important. But I have the possibility to meet somebody that opened my mind, that opened how we need to consider the African diaspora. Her name is Assata Shakur. She had a social life at that time. I am not talking about the present, at that time. And honestly, since I traveled for the first time to the United States in 1991 with my film Obongo, if people like you talking to me about the concept of African diaspora, what we have in common. You live in the United States, we live here in Cuba. It's true that it's a different society, more developed, less developed, an island, you live in a Greek country. But we have a slavery system in common, the suffering, the coffee plantation, the sugar plantation, and the same kind of history that doesn't understand many things. History that starts in our memory, in the way that the people preserve through the songs, through the poems, through the religion. That's how I made my film Conversation with My Grandmother. In 1993, I sit down with my grandmother, Inocencia, and I record her voice. In a cassette. It was not like now that you have beautiful record, things for record, in a cassette. And in the process that I was at home with my mom that has Alzheimer's, I started listening to that conversation. I decided to make a script with that conversation. And that's the film that is Conversation with My Grandmother. Diálogo con mi abuela.
Wow.
It's a combination of documentary and fiction. But that's the way that when I sit down with her and made that record, I didn't have an idea of the importance of that conversation. But at the same time, when I was making the script, I realized this is not only my family history, it's the history of many people. I was thinking also about the kind of battle that the black people here have. And I made, during 10 years, a trilogy that is called 1912, Breaking the Silence, about the history of the only black political party that the black people have here. And what happened in 1912? A massacre of around 3,000 Afro-Cubans, and after, a kind of silence. All the time that the black people have a big problem and injustice, after what is the next step? The silence. It didn't happen. Nothing happened. And this is something that happened in Cuba in 1912. You could get that information, 1912, Breaking the Silence. So I am not going to take so long. I have a dream now. And that is related with the connection between Afro-Cuban and African Americans. Buffalo soldiers in 1898, they came to Cuba for the independence of Cuba. And I want to talk about Maceo, because when Antonio Maceo traveled to the United States, especially New York, many people fell in love with them, and some relatives decided to name their sons Maceo. Maceo, yes, Maceo. So we need to talk about this history that we have in common.
I'm working for Belly of the Beast. Belly of the Beast is a U.S. media outlet. That is a kind of collaboration between U.S. journalists and Cuban journalists. We started just 4 years ago in 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, with a documentary, a series documentary that the name is The War on Cuba, that they have 6 episodes in which we try to explain how these sanctions are affecting the real Cubans in different ways. We trying to visualize the stories that U.S. media outlets don't cover, don't report it about Cuban people. And we try to show the other face, we would like to say, of Cuba, like the happiest one, the resilient one, the stories that we face as normals, the creativity that we have. We have also a documentary that is focusing Chris Small and his visit to Cuba in 2023. Also, we have the documentary about children that plays baseball, that they went to United States for the first time last year to play baseball in the Little Leagues. The last one is, because our major focus is U.S.-Cuba relations in a political level, the impact of the sanctions. So we have the war in Cuba that we shows the reality that we have to face as a Cuban in Cuba. But the other side of the corner was like, what's going on in the United States? Why they maintain the policy in Cuba for more than 60 years now? What are the interests behind the politics? So last year I traveled to the United States to try to interview politicians and to try to understand U.S. policy on Cuba. We shot 2 documentaries. The one is Uphill on the, that Mama was referring, was Uphill on the Hill. It's a documentary that focuses in the Congress in Washington, D.C. We spent weeks there trying to talk with politicians, with people who actually trying to maintain the policy of the U.S. policy on Cuba, the way Trump put it back from Obama era to Trump era, and now it's Trump-Biden policy. The other documentary is about Melanin on the Hudson. Is focused, maybe you know this name, Bob Menendez. He's not in jail yet. But he is one of the main subjects, like individuals who is behind U.S. policy on Cuba during Biden's administration. When I was in D.C., I was interviewing a Ghanaian American doctor. She was training here. Her name is Samira. And she was saying that after 9/11, she was afraid of being herself because she was black and Muslim. And that's the most terrible things that you can be living in the United States. And at that moment I was thinking like, okay, this is something bad, but I don't get deep in this topic. So when I recently researched about why Cuba is in the terrorist list and what that's mean for us, I discovered that one of the main reasons the U.S. government is using to maintain Cuba on the list is because we give asylum to black activists in the U.S.
Wow. Of course, yes.
So this is still using as a weapon against us. Even when every country around the world has the right to give asylum whatever they want.
Right.
Too.
So, and also, why black people, why black liberation is afraid, is a threat by the United States government. And this is all like questions that I ask myself, being in the United States. For example, being Congress, United States Congress is too white. And at that time, I remember there was a lot of Ukrainians asking for more money for more war. So the Congress looked pretty white for me, coming from Cuba and a black lady. And the dynamics are rare, bizarre. I don't know how to describe itself. I couldn't find an answer there about why they don't care about what is going on in Cuba and why they don't have in account when they decide the policy on Cuba, the impact that they have in the Cuban people. They always say that the sanctions only impact the government. That's misleading. This is fake information completely. But if it was true, you have to understand that most of the people in Cuba work for the government. If you see the data, the most of the people who work for the government, what color they are? Black. They look like us. Have you seen the private sector? Have you seen this, like the public sector? They look different. The color of the skins are different. So even if when it were true that the sanctions only affected the government, the sanctions are affecting the black people the most, because you can be more or less effective depending on your race, your gender, your geographical situation. There's a lot of factors that impact in the way that the sanctions affect you. And the other thing that I just realized is like, when I was in Washington, D.C., I have the opportunity to not only be in Congress, because being in Congress and trying to get some answers can be really frustrating for a Cuban journalist. But if you go down off the hill and you interview the people, in fact, Washington, D.C. is a pretty black city. I didn't know that.
Chocolate
City.
Chocolate City.
Exactly. Now it's getting less because of gentrification.
Yes.
But it's still
A chocolate city.
So I asked to the people about what they know about Cuba. If they believe that Cuba deserves to be on the state-sponsored terrorism list. If they know about the impact of the sanctions. If they know about, and even they are agreed with the sanctions. And the most, the 100% of the people I interviewed, they say no. We are not agreeing with that. So if I'm talking with the people who actually live in the city, who is the place where is actually the United States Congress and also is the capital of the United States, how is it possible that that voice is not in Congress?
Exactly.
Must know. The Cuban grandma must know.
Quiero más y agua,
Now, this is a visual representation of what it would look like to be a slave on an actual slave ship. As you can see, the slaves are made from clay and the boat is made from wood. Here's a bigger view of the boat. This is a vase from the 1800s that's meant to hold flowers, as well as this lady. Her name is Aurelia Crespo. She is credited with giving the first violin performance dedicated to Oshun. Oshun is the Lukumi Orisha that represents Sweetwater's gold and happiness. Everything that makes life worth the effort. And this is just a decorative glass plate. And this is some sort of punishment system that they used to burn and punish the slaves in. And then of course we have a photo, an image of Fidel Castro, who was a Cuban revolutionary politician. He served as the Prime Minister of Cuba from 1959 to 1976 and the President of Cuba from 1976 to 2008.
Experience has been in Cuba overall wonderful. They're very welcoming. I practice Spanish and they take their time to help and listen, which is not the same as I've gotten like when I've gone to visit Mexico. For example, I learned today that in order to go to the bank and make a withdrawal or whatever banking service you need, you can be waiting overnight. You'd be waiting hours and hours and hours in the hot sun before even going inside to wait several more hours, which is something is unheard of. Waiting hours in order to just get a bag of bread. So, I mean, I don't know exactly what can be done to improve that, but it's something that I feel like, you know, collectively should be, you know, discussed in order to help the Cuban people, and then as well as like access to like food and supplies. I know with the embargoes it makes that difficult, but you know, for example, today I visited a supermarket, which was the first time I've seen that. I didn't see that in Havana, but I saw that here in Tanza, and so I was a little curious, like, okay, well, why aren't they available in Havana? So I think you know, there's more work that can be done. Hopefully they'll, you know, other countries will be able to come in and help, just like how we did to come here and support the Cuban people.
So that's something that is really important for us to understand. that we're coming from a matriarchal and matrilineal inheritance, which is so beautiful. So the Taino people, the Caciques were the rulers, the women, the chiefs in this indigenous culture that inhabited Cuba. They named it Cuba, which means fertile land, or Cuban, or Cubao. They were also in Jamaica, they were in Haiti, they were in Puerto Rico. So a part of my lineage, like I had said on the bus, I have been studying shamanism since I was 25 years old. It was introduced to me by the Maasai people of Kenya and Tanzania. It was really a rude awakening for me. It was a transformative experience for me. And those people are responsible for how I live today. Also, Chinese medicine's origin is shamanic. So I didn't know that when I went to Chinese medicine school, started studying this medicine, but it's also shamanic. So the role and purpose of the shaman was to instill harmony within the community through these sacred rituals and through these sacred ceremonies. They used psilocybin mushrooms, they used ayahuasca, they used rape, they used oroba, they used these hallucinogenic substances, plant medicines. These are actually plant medicines that was given to us by the divine, God, whatever name you use. They're in the earth and they're for our personal healing. Because what I have learned as a psychologist about mental illness is that mental illness, well, they don't teach this in psychology, but I am a transpersonal psychologist and also studying Chinese medicine and shamanism. Mental illness is first and foremost a spiritual disharmony. It is a spiritual disharmony. When a person is dealing with mental illness, psychological deficits, it is because they are not in harmony with nature. They're not in harmony with themselves. And they're not in harmony with the community. With what? Yes, with one another. They're not in harmony with people. This brings on mental illness. We have an epidemic in our society of depression. We have a lot of young people committing suicide. This is a spiritual disharmony. But if we're not providing sacred ceremonies for our children, for our youth, where do they go? They have to do something to prove that they're men and women. Yes. And the things that they are grasping to prove that they're men and women, their own personal rituals, are very dangerous. Yes. Okay? Very, very dangerous. But there has to be some kind of rites of passage. And if we as a community were not providing that rites of passage, they're going to find it themselves, okay, to their detriment. So when I talk about psilocybin mushrooms, I've experienced much of all of it. And it's very interesting because when I was in my first year at Boston University studying psychology, I think I was probably a sophomore or just starting out, I heard about these two professors at Harvard University. Richard Alport was one of them. He later on became Robert Ramdas. They were kicked out of Harvard University for talking like this. This was in like the late 60s. So they were kicked out for trying to bring this plant medicine to the U.S. population for healing. Okay? So it's fast forward some 50 years on. Now, the U.S. government is saying that plant medicine is healthy, is great. They've been using it in Switzerland for many years to help people transition without fear. They've been using it for depression. They've been using it for bipolar disorder, for suicidal ideation. They have been using plant medicine, hallucinogenic, mushrooms, psilocybin, ayahuasca, jojoba, marape, to help people come into harmony and balance. Because we are lost. And we are all healing from something. You know, people come to me all the time about trauma. They're going through some trauma. They're going through stress. We are all healing from something. Because we don't live in a healthy country.
¿Dónde va José? ¿Dónde va los cocos que
people-to-people exchange is important because, especially for the children and for the people that have only lived wherever they lived, whether it's in a state or in a country, in a county, it's important to be able to see that there's more people that look like us out there, and there's more types of ways to live. It's not just, how we live in the United States or how we live in California or wherever. There's so many ways that children live and survive all around the world, and it's important to see that and to help each other. The same struggles that are happening where I live in Sacramento, California, there's those same struggles that are happening out here. So to be able to realize that because of the state of the world we live in, there's a lot of cons that we all face together.
I was born into a union family. I was a legislative secretary from 1978 to 2001. I was a state employee for the state of California from 2001 to 2017 when I retired. I was a union organizer for state employees. We left CSEA and formed SEIU Local 1000. I started as a grievance rep, and by the time I retired, I was a chief steward who could sit on arbitrations and do field campaigns, organizing. So the intention of this Juneteenth celebration was to understand and learn more about the alignment of African American civil rights journey and the Afro-Cubans civil rights journey. So this is a Juneteenth celebration with the Black Space Healing. The Black Space Healing part of it is for our people to heal from the trauma of law enforcement interactions. And we had to have those hard conversations and those healing ceremonies off-site of the USA and America. And the reason being, there are no guns on the street here in Cuba. We feel very safe, we feel very loved. The Cuban people are very welcoming and embracing and hospitable to other Afro-Cubans, Afro-Americans. So we came for a Juneteenth celebration. We learned about our history and we healed.
Shaking, my body just shaking from what just happened to me.
An emotional plea for justice for Nakia tonight at the state capitol after the local mother says she was knocked out by Solano County deputies.
I'm the director of the Melanin Day School Academy. My name is Nikki Porter. And as a part of the Melanin Day School Academy, our mission is to inform and educate members of the African diaspora, especially Black families, on methods and tools to heal and thrive together. Mama Roz, Queen Amina, had the vision of going to Cuba. And I wanted to be the support for my elder to make that trip possible. So this has been a project over many years to come and manifest into reality now. So I listened to her, the need and the call for Black space healing in Cuba, where people, especially of African descent, especially African Americans that have gone through so much trauma, so much tragedy, so much pain, that they be able to come to Cuba in a free and open space to just be, to come together collectively to heal, to release that pain, to release that trauma, and to be in a space where they no longer had to hold on to all of those things they were bound to. I was but a vessel to help bring Queen Amina's vision to reality. So coming to Cuba was a complete 365 degrees of completion to see our Black families heal and thrive in real time. This is why we came to Cuba. This is why we dedicated our time, our effort, our sweat, and our blood to make sure that we knew that our community knew that we were here to support them no matter what. I think it's so important because you not only see people from what is in the media or from, secondhand from somewhere else, but you get to meet and exchange with people firsthand. You get to bring your own experiences and be embraced. That's exactly what we were here. No other agendas focused on being able to support the Cuban people. And so having that focus really helped us to be very intentional about coming with an open perspective, not being judgmental, but really here to learn about the similarities more so than our differences, so that we can come together collectively, right, in solidarity to be the best that we possibly can collectively. And that there's so many Afro-Cuban people here. As a people, a lot of times in Americas, we see ourselves as the minorities. But here is the realization that we are the global majority, right? People of color, there's different words. A lot of our black people out here, seeing them was amazing to see. Doing everyday things that we all do, going to school, teaching your children, feeding your children, coming together as a family, getting your hair cut, seeing those simple things, not being in touristy areas, pulled away from the actual people, where you were able to connect one-on-one. I'm a mother myself. So seeing the moms with their babies on their hips, getting their groceries, going and walking to where they needed to go, the babies looking out for each other, even the adults in the community, the elders looking out for each other. Those things were, you may be like, is that a fact? Yeah, it's a fact. Because a lot of times we don't see people as people. And it's very easy to dehumanize people. So it was fun seeing the children play. It was fun seeing the adults dance. It was fun seeing the inspiration between the different cultures come together and just have a damn good time. Yeah, I said it. I love Cuba.
Bye.